Joe Conklin in the shop. And today we're going to take another look at this 1941 D-18. If you remember last time, I was in the process of completing the bridge. The bridge is completed and glued on. And also, in the meantime, I've refretted the instrument. I'm in the process of making a new nut and saddle while at the same time finishing off the fret job. So, because it's an older Martin guitar without a truss rod, the refret process, in addition to getting a new set of frets, is also part of straightening out the neck, about putting the minimal amount of relief that I'm looking for in the neck. And that minimal amount of relief is somewhere around 5/1000 of an inch at the 7th fret from the top of the fret to the bottom of a straight edge, with the straight edge resting on the 1st fret and the 14th fret at the body. And so you pull the frets and then you, for the most part, sand the fingerboard to try and get that minimal relief. I'm looking to actually put a slight back bow in the neck in that sanding of the fretboard, so that when the neck is pulled up from string tension, I get that minimal amount of relief. I have to start with it actually less than dead straight, which is back bow. So I've already done that process, and I have shaped a new bone blank and put it in there, shaped a new saddle blank and put them in there. And now I've strung it up for the first time, so I have an idea of where it's sitting with string tension on. The first thing that I'm going to do is to see where that relief is right now. So I'm going to press down a string between the 14th and the 15th fret, so that the string is resting on that 14th fret, and between the nut and the 1st fret, so that string is acting as straight edge. And I'm using a backlit situation with my desk lamp here to take a look at this 5th through 7th fret area and see, yeah, there's just the most minimal amount of relief there. And I'm going to look at each string to make sure the neck is even as I go across and there are no anomalies. Looks pretty good. And then I'm going to do, yeah, I checked that before we started just to make sure. I cheated a little bit, but now I'm going to measure that relief. There's my Stuart McDonald straight edge. I set it on the fretboard there, right in the middle of the guitar. Is resting on the 14th fret and the 1st fret. Now I'm going to take my feeler gauge. I've got a 5/1000 feeler gauge out here. I'm going to slide it right there underneath the straight edge at the top of the 7th fret. And I've got that, pretty much got that 5/1000 relief that I'm looking for. It fits in there real nice. Maybe I could do it like this so y'all can see it. Just a little bit of friction between that straight edge and the fret and the feeler gauge. So I'm pretty confident in that. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure my frets are even, or there are no frets sitting up proud higher than the others. So I'm going to use a small straight edge here, and the idea is to rest the straight edge on 3 frets at a time and see if they rock. What I don't want is to get this little bit of action like so. So that
mail order 855, mail order 855, please.
So that fret in the middle. So I set it on there and I'm looking for it to not rock. This one is very close. No, it's not really rocking though. That was a little close. I'm checking every string and every fret. There was the 2nd fret, now the 3rd fret. I would do this all the way up, and if I find any high frets, there we go. That little tick, tick, tick. It's not rocking right there, but it is rocking here at the 3rd string. Just minimally. And, oh, it's rocking quite a bit on that end. So, I'm going to take my handy pencil. There it is. I'm going to take and mark that 4th fret so that I know where those spots are. It's really right here at the 3rd fret, or the 3rd string, and over here on the end, and continue on that look. So that when I get this, oh, there's another. Just a minimal amount of rock right here at the end of the 4th fret on the high E and the B string. So that's the 5th fret, high E and the B string. So when I'm done with this, I can of course take the string tension off and zero in on those particular high frets in those particular high fret areas. Making sure that the fret is seated properly might involve tapping it in if it is not seated in, or I also want to make sure that it's seated solidly, that it's not moving around. Little teeny bit there too. And so if it does feel like it's moving around a little bit, mostly it would be on the end, where I might see it bounce a little bit, or might sound. I might drag a file across it, which is how I'm going to take the high spot out. I might run a little bead of super glue in there to make sure the fret stays where I put it. So now I'm right here at that's the 13th fret. Now I'm here at the 14th fret. And I expect actually there to be a little bit of rock there at the 14th fret, because that's how I've trued the fretboard, which is, I mentioned before, without string tension, I have that slight drop off here. From the 14th fret to the 20th fret, I also build in a slight drop off, because this is sort of the fulcrum point when the string tension goes on. It kind of bends from there. So I expect it to pull up a little bit. And if I leave this exactly flat from 14 to 20, what you can end up with is a situation where very little movement of the neck to the body under string tension, which can happen to an instrument when it hasn't been strung to tension for a while, or when it's just been redone like this instrument. A couple months from now, I might find some settling and changing of the neck to the body very subtly. And if I leave that exactly flat and it moves ever so little, I could get this sort of thing where from the 14th to the 20th fret it's actually tipping up, and then I could get a buzz there at the 14th fret or any number of situations. So I want to, again, I build in a little drop off there, and when I do so, it wouldn't be unusual then for it to rock there a little bit. So I look at these frets independently. So anyhow, I've got a couple of frets to take down. I've already more than roughed in my nut blank. I have the edges, I have the bottom where it's seated there on the shelf, and this width so that it fits nice and snugly between the end of the fingerboard and the end of the peghead veneer, which sort of defines that little space there. And I'm also trying to get this dimension really quite exactly, the edges of it. And one thing I'm trying not to do is to sand that edge so this fit is real nice, with fairly rough paper. Like I rough it in on the table sander in the machine room, 60-80 grit paper, and I can get that to fit very good, but then I have to clean up that 60 to 80 grit sandpaper marks. And of course, to do that, I'm actually making it a little smaller this way. So I leave it a little bit proud when I hit the 60 to 80 grit, and then work it down with some files. Let me see, where are my files? Here we go. This is a nice file that has a smooth cut, but fairly quick, so I can remove a fair amount of material, but it allows me to remove it reasonably quickly and leave a smooth surface, and it finishes off with this really fine grit file. So I have even a bit of a shine there when I do that, and then I'll finish it off with 240 grit paper and 400 grit paper so that it is right there where I need it. Then I take and cut the nut slots and rough in the nut slots, and then I finalize it once I have the instrument up to tension. And I've already done that, so I pretty much have the nut slots where I want them. So now what I want to do is to final shape the top of the nut here. I did take it down fairly close to the depth of those nut slots, but ideally the slot would only be deep enough to cover part of the string, or at most all of the string. On the wound strings, I really like to have a part of the top of that string sticking out from the top of that nut, not usually about 3/4 of the string. A little hard to determine exactly what that is, but basically a little bit of the string sticking out of the top there, and shooting for as close as I can get to that on the 2 unwound strings, which are pretty small strings, so I usually have the string buried in there. So once I get the depth of the slots where I need them, I can now shape the top of the nut with that same idea. I can't take it all the way down to exactly what I need with the rough grid, or when I smooth out that grid, I will be below where I want to be. And I also want to shape the front edge of the nut here. A Martin nut has a fairly distinct look where it comes off the front, or the edge here, right where the fingerboard, where it meets the fingerboard, which is straight up from that fingerboard, and it slopes downward towards the peg head in a nice smooth curve. And then the edges also have a fairly distinct look where I take this front corner on each and round that off and blend that into that front look. So that's what I'm looking to do next. And I'm thinking about, when I take the string tension off, I want to tackle both of these jobs at the same time. I also have an idea of where the action is right now and what I need to do to the saddle, so I can take any material off the saddle that I need to. On a vintage style through bridge saddle, you can see that here's the line of the wing that is defined. That's one of the things I did in the machine room last time when we were making the bridge, is define those wings. So this line right here is distinct, and I want to leave that look there. So I can't take this material off the bottom of the saddle. It's going to shorten the saddle because I've also cut that wing that was in the bridge right into the end of the saddle. And if I shorten the saddle, that fit will go right away. So I need to take it off the top. So I'll take some material off the top and then re-crown the top of that saddle to look very much like a fret top. Nice rounded crown there. So I'm trying to keep that all in mind. I have the string tension on. I'm going to take the strings off and get as much of that accomplished as I can before I have to restring it the next time, so I'm as close to being finished as I can. So let's rough shape the top of this nut here. So I'm going to take string tension down and take my bridge pins out, and we'll hit the machine room, rough in the top of the nut, and then we'll work with the files there too. Get that final shape out of the nut. As I mentioned, once I get things where I want with my files, I will hit it with 240, 400, and 600 grit paper, and I can take it to our buffer, and we have a buffer that's set aside for bone and other saddle type materials to put a nice polish on. Pins on here. Put the pins in and out in the same order. Sometimes there can be, especially on an older pin, this is a nice new set of pins. On an older pin, especially if they're made of plastic, but really of any material, they can, sitting there under string tension and environmental changes, each pin can be a unique size. And so you fit the pins into the bridge pin holes, and it's nice to return them to the same holes just so that fit remains perfect. All right, so here's our nut. You can see a light pencil line there that comes in at the very bottom of each of those slots. I drew that pencil line with a real straightforward little tool. It was just a pencil, clip the eraser off, and sanded a flat surface on it, especially trying to split this point right here so that when I use this to draw a line that is a very good tracing line. So I want the basic ballpark for the bottom of that slot is to be the same height as these frets. So I take and draw it on there like so, and that gives me the ballpark.
See that again.
You want to see that again? Just set it on there, butt it up against and let it rest on the frets, and draw that line. And it gives me a pretty distinct little line there to follow, so that when I'm roughing in those nut slots, I make sure I stay above that line.
All right.
Stay above that line, and then I map out the nut slots so that there is a very consistent space between the strings, not from center to center of string, because the strings are different sizes. So the center to center of the low strings, that space between those lower strings will be smaller than the ones on the high string. The high strings, because the strings are bigger. So I map it out such that I get as consistent a space in between the strings as I can. And since I've left those slots a little bit proud of that line, when I'm roughing them in there, I'm constantly checking that spacing to make sure it's maintained. And I can manipulate that spacing a little bit left and right while I'm cutting that slot deeper. And I'm aware of that. If it's the first thing I'm doing is trying to make sure that space is as I've calculated, and once I get it, I can drop them right down to very close to that line, and I can do this whole other process here to get them roughed in. All right, so what do I need? I need safety glasses, and I think that's it. So let's go see what we can do. Come over to the belt sander, and what I want to do is take this top surface, this similar angle, and reduce it down to very near the height I want. A little bit proud so I can take out the sanding scratches. And of course, it's going to be a little bit taller here on the bass strings because they're a little bit bigger, and it's going to go down very close to the top surface of the treble strings there, because I'm trying to maintain a curve here that is very similar to the curve on the fingerboard of the frets, and is also mimicked at the bridge and the saddle. And but I want, but it's going to be a little slope to the treble side here. And at the same time, I'm also trying to round this tight line off there. I'm trying to take a line from about halfway in between here and slope it down to a line that is very close to the surface here. This edge is the one that sits against that peghead veneer, which is about that thick. So, and then I'm gonna knock these front corners off so I can blend that all together here in a few minutes. So it's gonna be a little loud. On goes the dust collector. Just taking a little bit off that surface, you can see quite a bit more off towards the treble side. You can see the space between the pencil line and the top is thicker over here and gradually gets thinner and follows that nice curve. Get rid of that sharp corner on the front edge. probably about the most I can do on that sander. One of the keys in doing all this is to not sand your fingertips off. But you can actually see there, look at that. See those little light spots on each? I did actually touch the sander with those, so my fingerprints are slowly disappearing, I guess. And I have, I would say that me and every other repair person out there working on a belt sander such as this has got some painful fingertips before you learn how to do it without going too far. The key, the idea is you can take off material super quick with this. If you can take it off quickly and efficiently, it minimizes the handwork. So you want to take as much as you can, but of course you don't want to take too much, because if you take too much, all the work that you've done on this nice bone nut could go for naught if you take too much, because you reach a point where you've taken too much and you've got to start over, which is a very painful process for the ego, for sure. All right. Oops, already got off.
All right.
So from here, I will take my files and do my work, and then do some sandpaper work. And I will end up with a nut shaped exactly as I want and ready to be polished out. By the way, this material was provided to me by the owner of the instrument with some very interesting walrus tooth. So it's not bone or cow bone, which is quite a bit more common, but fossilized walrus tooth, which has a most of the time it is more dense and harder, that fossilized process, than regular cow bone. So you get a little more volume and sustain out of these materials. Of course, you don't want it to be too dense and too hard, because you can go to the point of diminishing returns where it just sounds harsh. So anyhow, fossilized walrus tooth. All right, thanks a lot for tuning in to the shop.
What's up?
And we'll see y'all in a couple of weeks. Like us and share us on Facebook. So long.